Hey everybody, Marcus back again. This week with a pretty good amount of these builders kits going out in the mail. Everyone's gonna start getting them in their hands over the next week or two. So I'd like to go over a few things about basically the car and the setup and some of the reasons of why I did what I did. One thing I want to say about this whole thing with race cars and setup, and this applies to any race car, any size, dirt, anything, it doesn't matter. You, the guys that are fast, their setups work in conjunction with the entire car. And so what I mean by that is like, yeah, you could probably buy the chassis alone and change nothing on the car, and it's probably going to feel better, but it may not. So the parts that I make, especially the builder's kit, they're designed to work together. This week I went through a lot of conversations with a lot of people, a lot of customers, and people just ask questions, and I'm good with that. But a lot of people will buy, they'll buy a chassis, they'll buy a shock relocate kit, and then they are not happy with the car, or it doesn't do this, or doesn't do that, but they don't have the right springs on the car, side springs, front springs, tires aren't right. I'm trying to, when I give a setup, it's hard for me to help you if I don't know what's on your car or if you're not running exactly what I say. Now, I'm saying that because, yes, obviously, everyone changes everything. Everyone drives different. I understand that. But if you build a car just like I tell you to build it, and then you say that, hey, you know what, I go into mid-turn, it's pushing, or hey, I can tell you exactly what to change on the car. But if I don't know that you've got, all-wheel drive springs on the front or something that we just don't use on the car, it makes such a huge difference. And we all know that. If you put if you change a spring setting by zero point 0.2 shims on the front, the car drives different. So these cars are super, super delicate and super precise. So it's super important that you put exactly the setup that I suggest, at least to start off with, until you get used to the car. Then you can do what you want to do. Everybody drives different, like I said, and I understand that. I don't drive like everybody else, but my cars are typically very, very easy to drive, and anybody can drive my cars. Some cars, I'm not a point and shoot driver, so my cars are very, very smooth, and I don't even use brakes. Rarely do I ever use brakes. Point and shoot drivers are in, out, in, out, in, out on the brakes, and that's a completely different setup for the most part. But I do have some guys on the team that drive that way. They just put a lot of drag brake in the car, and they're fine. So that's one of the things I want to kind of clear the air a little bit on that. Especially when I talk to people daily, all day, especially this past week, all day long, trying to help people while they're on the track setting the car up, and then they don't have the right body. They've got the wrong springs on the car. The tires are different. The wheels are different. All these things make a huge, significant difference. And I set the cars up for a reason. It's not because I'm just being stubborn. I know what the car does. I've got a team of guys that use the car, and we all basically have almost the identical setup, and it works on 90% of the time as it sits. In fact, we had a discussion this week where we were all ending up back at the stock setup that we started off with. We try everything and always end back at the same setup. Only thing we really change are front tires. We may do a different sidewall prep, or we might do maybe a different offset or a different compound, but that's really about it. We don't change much at all in the cars. Freshen up and go for the most part. Okay, got that out of the way. So the builder's kit comes with 6 different components, which is going to be your chassis, pod weight, weighted bumper, bearings, shock relocate kit, and then your FPM, the floating pod mount. So if you buy that kit, you have just about everything you need to get the car working right. What you need other than that will be the GLF F1 side springs. Those springs go in the front of this car. And there goes my light. Okay, those springs go in the front of the car. Side springs, we usually just go from blues or purples. We don't go any lighter than that. The GLR springs are so light anyway that they're very minimal difference, but blues and purples are where we stick at with that. The front of the car is extremely stiff, so you don't want a stiff spring in the back. The car is going to traction roll. It's going to be sketchy. It's going to be difficult to drive. Don't even try it. I tell people, just take your time, order the right parts, start off fresh. Don't get frustrated, because I can assure you, I've tested every combo on this car of every component, anything made for it, and this is what I've come up with, and we've come up with, that is your most consistent setup. Period. Okay, so pod weight. Contrary to popular belief, this does not make the car rotate. It actually gives it more rear grip. Whenever you increase the rear grip of your car, you will lose some of your front grip, in essence. So what we've basically discovered is, on Pancar anyway, is that when we install this pod weight, we usually end up having to bump the dual rate up 3 to 5 points. Or we can go with a little bit more aggressive front tire, or less sidewall, or, depends on how the track is and the situation. All right. But the one thing about the rear pod weight, it keeps the back of the car on the ground. Traction rolling goes away, gets reduced anyway. It's pretty good, especially on Pancar. On Mod Car, I haven't quite got a proper setting for it just yet. I don't get much track time because I'm in Houston. We don't have any tracks here. I have to drive to San Antonio for decent testing. So I'm still working on that. But I'll figure it out. It won't take me very long. I'm close. Okay, so move on to the chassis. We've all seen the chassis before. We all know what the chassis does. Low, heavy, wide, CG. That's what I'm shooting for with this thing. And it does work. The last batch of chassis are the raw ones. Now these are 6 grams lighter than the black ones. So I've been getting a lot of super stock inquiries. So I think we're gonna go. I mean, we're using these right now. We don't have a choice right now, but this is going to be the one to use for your super stock and stock classes. The car works really, really good in super stock. It might be better in super stock than mod, to be honest with you. But in super stock and stock, you obviously don't need the weights and so on and so forth. You just want this on there. Moving to the shock relocate kit. For those who haven't kind of been around here lately, the GLR's got that weird piece that goes in the back of the pod that goes up to the shock. And then what happens is you get a really weird angle when the shock goes up and down, and it goes, I think it goes more progressive when you do that. So what I've basically done is put the pivot point of the shock right in line with the ball. So you have a constant radius is what we're doing with that. And that's why I have that there. Kind of a general rule, the flatter you get this shock, the easier the car is to drive. Obviously there's extremes to everything. Lately we've been running 3 shims on the front and 0 1 in the back, and it's been pretty decent. With the red or green spring, been pretty awesome. And when you're using the floating pod mount, it does feel different than the stock pod mount. So what we're doing now, we're adding this blue shim right there. We're adding a 1 millimeter shim under that, and it makes the back end feel a lot better. Not quite as floppy, I guess you should say. Easiest way to explain it. All right, moving on to the front. This particular car has aluminum arms on it. The story behind that is that I assume that screw that's in the top of the arm was able to adjust the gap on the springs. I've been having issues with springs not being the same exact height. They've been up, 0.1, 0.2 off difference in height. On a car, it only uses 0.2 millimeter of droop. That makes a difference because one side will be no droop, one side will have 2.2. And if you try to adjust it, you end up with 4 on one side, 2 on the other, and it's kind of a pain in the butt. But anyway, when I bought the arms, got them in, I realized that's not what that screw's for. So no point in having them, but they do look pretty good. I will say that. The weight-wise, they're less than a gram difference for the pair over plastic, so I'm not really worried about that. And on that note, the aluminum bulkhead and lower plate is 8.6 grams. The plastic is 4 grams. That's a lot of weight on top of the axle. that will numb the car. The car is going to have an issue with steering. It'll push and then grab. I strongly suggest using the plastic bulkheads. If you want to use the aluminum arms, that's completely fine. Obviously, it's working. They do shim different though. The aluminum arms seem to be about I think I measured 0.2 or 0.3 off. So instead of having, typically I will run a blue. I'll run a blue shim, a blue spacer, a 0.3 shim, and then I'll put a 0.3 shim on the bottom. And that's what I typically do. But because the difference in the height, now I'm using just a 1 millimeter and a 0.3, what the hell is there? And a 0.3 on top, and then no shims on the bottom. And that gives you your base droop. Hard to really tell with the camera, but anyway, and that's that. Then we're gonna go talk about the front bumper a little bit. So the front bumper, I think there's a lot of, I don't want to say confusion, but the point of the bumper and the point of the weight of the bumper is a tuning aid. So, you're not going to always have full weight on it. You're not going to always have no weight on it. It depends on the track. It depends on the layout, the grip levels. It's a tuning aid. So you may not ever need to put weight on there. You may be a race that you don't need it. Puerto Rico, I didn't need weight on it at all. So I didn't use it, right? I come back home, go to RCHQ, it gets edgy. I put a little bit of weight on it. Period. That's what it's for. For the guys who don't run a lot of the big races, you don't have a lot of time to test once racing starts. But we all know that grip is going to come up from Q1 to Q3. It always does, right? But obviously you don't want to change tires last minute because you have no idea what the track's going to be. So what you do, knowing the grip's going to come up, you put a little bit of weight on there. It's not going to slow the car down. It'll take the edge off. And this is just one of those deals that when you start running a lot of bigger races, you know that that's going to happen. And it usually on your Sunday, it's even worse than that. There's so much grip on Sunday. You only got one practice session in the morning, maybe an hour or two, and you got to let it eat. And I don't know about you guys, but the worst thing for me is driving a car at traction roll because then I get real timid and I don't drive like I should drive. I have to drive, lazy, and I don't like it at all. So I'd rather have a pushy car come main time that I can drive through traffic than an edgy car that's going to traction roll. Because one traction roll against these guys, it's over. You're not going to traction roll off the track and win the race. Not going to happen. So you kind of be a little conservative on it and tune your car so that it's drivable, a race driving car, not a qualifying car, if that makes sense. Anyway, guys, like I said, this is the latest rendition of the car. As I posted, we're gonna stick with reflex wheels for this year. Hobbywing, reflex servos. This is what we're doing now. Any questions, guys? Hit me up. You know where I'm at, and talk to you guys later.